Hoodoo plant mamas, get your soul fed and your spirit read.
This here ain't no trend. I possess the power from way back when folk were stripped from all of their kin, so they had to find the magic within. Ancestors to gather my herbs, I conjure at my altar. Voodoo plant mama, I manifest growth and I release trauma.
Child, we just out here trying to water our plants and mind our business, you know? Everybody ain't from the deep south, man. Everybody can't have culture like us.
Hey y'all, and welcome back to Hoodoo Plant Mamas. I'm your co-host, Leah Nicole.
And I'm Danny B.
And it is Hoodoo Heritage Month. We forgot to say that last time. It's Hoodoo Heritage Month. It's a time to educate a lot of people on what Black spirituality is and isn't. And it's a time to share hidden hoodoos, which is what we plan to do this season. We're coming out with a new episode every Friday of Hoodoo Heritage Month. So before we get started, Danny V, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Had a little health scare, but I'm here and I'm thankful. But, I'm reaching that era of my life where my body is no longer taking the things that it took in my 20s. And so if something is not good for me, she's like, hell no, bitch. Do you want another hospital bill? And I'm like, no, you win. So that's where I am. But I'm thankful to be alive. And I'm actually thankful that my body communicates with me in a way that has not yet killed me yet. Like, if your body is speaking and you're still alive, she's trying to give you a chance to get it together. So I'm thankful for that. Even though we're not on gratitude, I really am thankful because I've been going through it.
I would say I am in a similar position, but it's more like surrounding my mindset. So we are just getting out of the eclipse season. And I think for me, it's making me aware of the things that I believed and the things I did in my 20s that's not going to work for me in the next few years and the pivots that I need to make. So I'm grateful for what I'm learning. I'm grateful for a little bit of guidance and clarity. So a little bit of gratitude. So Danny, are you grateful for anything else?
I'm grateful for this month. I want to share that today during my morning pool before I got sick. I pulled from the African Goddess Rising Oracle, Radical Rebirth, and then I pulled Knight of Pentacles, Justice, and the Death card. I immediately received that as something is changing and you really got to step up and take ownership. It's a lot of stuff in your life that's not balanced, that Justice card. And it's you got to step up. I keep getting the Knight of Pentacles. I think that's what I said. Yeah. I keep getting that. And if you don't know what the Knight of Pentacles is, it's a person on a horse holding a pentacle, like a coin. The Death card is almost the exact opposite, where they're facing the same way, but the Death card is holding that flag, and it's a skeleton, not a man, of course. So, it's just I got to step up, and I also got to welcome the change and stop resisting, because
Mm.
there's something beautiful on the way. So that was a really good reading, especially with that rebirth card, Radical Rebirth. I think that entire spread represents that. So I'm really thankful for the spirits being like, we got you, but you need to get it together. What about you?
I do want to say I'm grateful for the spirits as well. Like I said, with me getting through the eclipse season, I was doing a lot of tarot to try to get some guidance and to get some clarity. I do want to say that I'm thankful for the longshoremen. There's currently a port strike that is happening. It's going to hurt the US economy in a very big way. And I just feel like they're not asking for a lot. They asked for $5 extra an hour. That's it. And one longshoreman can bring in like $1 million a day through their labor, but they're just asking for $5. And the people in power did not want to give them that. So they're shutting everything down, which I'm like, good for them. Good for them. I'm on their side. It's going to hurt us a little bit over the next few months, but I think we can handle it. I'm grateful for them, for
Me
their
too.
courage.
All of us should really be on strike from the American government, but we don't have to get into that.
So today, I wanted to talk about creating the sensual self. So, when I think about creating the sensual self, I think about my journey of coming into who I am sexually. And so, the first book that I wrote, it was a memoir, and I wrote about how traumatic puberty was for me. And maybe this is because, like, I went from being bullied as a child for the way that I looked and how I act and who I am to like being sexualized. And it was such a traumatic shift for me. And I remember there was this one boy in particular who would like physically and verbally attack me. And then it was like 2 years later, he's like, "Oh, I just think you're so interesting. I want to get to know you better." The whole time he's looking at my chest. And I'm like, ah! I just felt so gross and disgusting. I felt so out of control in terms of what was happening to me. And I remember at that time, like, I literally did not want to have anything to do with sex. I didn't want to have anything to do with sexuality. I was covering my body. I was doing all sorts of things to reject and push back against anyone seeing myself in that way. And it was not just me, it was a lot of the people around me. Like, everybody was so afraid of Black girls exploring and figuring out their sexuality. There's so much fear mongering around it. Like, we talk about Black girls being quote unquote fast and having to cover up when men are around. And I'm someone that really hates wearing clothes, but I hate wearing clothes for sensory reasons. And I remember being in high school, I would cut my shirts because it feels like it's choking me when I wear a t-shirt. And my friend accused me of doing it to like attract boys. And I'm like, I literally can't breathe in a t-shirt. But now everything that I do, all of my movements, all of my actions, people are analyzing it and being like, oh, it has to be something sexual going on with you, when I was just a teenage girl that was trying to live and breathe and exist. But there were all of these connotations that was put onto me. So before I go any further, Danny, what was your experience having to navigate like sexuality as you're moving through puberty as a young Black girl?
It's complicated because I have been extremely homosexual since I was a child, like very knowing in that, or I didn't have the language, but I do remember like my first experience of being sexualized. I was actually in the fourth grade because I started puberty abnormally early. So I had breasts and I also started my period and I was 9 years old. That means most of the girls had that was not their experience, particularly with developing breasts and just developing in general, like what your body is doing things. I was getting bullied in this grade, but I was also getting sexually harassed. So boys were simultaneously being mean to me and also like violating me, touching my butt. If you have to walk through the desk or one of them will like smack my butt. Or one of my most distinct memories was it was right before the bell rang. So he ran. This boy, mind you, fourth grade, we're children. He grabbed my shirt and pulled it down to expose my breasts to everybody. And mostly it was just boys. And then they were all laughing. And then he ran out of the room. And of course, everybody left. And I left and it was just like, whatever. I had on a bra. I had on my little bra, but still it was like embarrassing. But I feel like I was so used to it. I just was dissociated in the moment. So yeah, it was just a mess. And then it was a mix of things. If it wasn't my family commenting on my weight, it was weird stuff happening at church. So my grandma, I'm able to reflect now and see it. There were certain things my grandma would not let me wear. I will never forget. My daddy bought me this really cute sparkly swimsuit. It was so pretty. It was like a halter top swimming suit, pink sparkly, something that, I was really interested in at that time. And he also bought me this other like halter outfit. My grandma, when she saw that, she literally was like, "You not wearing that." ever. Like, I think she ended up throwing it away. Mind you, these were from the kids section. They weren't sexual, but she was just very weird about that. I also have a memory of a deacon in church. I think I maybe was in high school, came up to me and said, "Don't you think that dress is a little short?" And I was like, I don't even know if I responded, but it was just like, why you worried about it? And even those experiences, they don't even really scratch the surface. We both grew up in Mississippi. We already know how it goes. I don't think I started to fully process like the fullness of my experiences with sexuality until adulthood. And I think a part of that process has been, and I know this is taking a left, but it's all related, divesting from compulsory heterosexuality and accepting that I do not desire cishet men. When I thought I did, it was simply because I had been conditioned to believe there was value in being chosen by them, and also church and brainwashing. And I had very low self esteem. So I think for me, it was just about feeling like wanted. But all of that is related, whether you're queer or you're straight. If you're read as a woman in the world, there's still all of that wrapped into like value and what devalues you and sex and pleasure, even not understanding that they should be coexisting.
Mm.
Like, you are not just somebody's sex doll or whatever, because that's how I feel, especially as a teenager. When you start having sex, that's, I can't speak for everybody. Maybe I was having fun, but I suspect a lot of us wasn't. So, you know what I mean? Like, you deserve to experience full body pleasure. And that's, if you grow up in a particular type of way, that's something that could take decades to get to, unfortunately. So, yeah.
Yeah. I just want to start by being like, that was really traumatic, and I'm sorry that happened to you.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even think about it. I've told that story before. I guess that is kind of fucked up. I
I
got
was like, oh
ruthlessly
my God, I'm
bullied. It was,
sorry.
it was so much going on in my life then. To me, I felt like that was light, but yeah. Maybe we need to put a trigger warning. Because I was like, I didn't, now that I think about it, that is kind of
I was like,
intense.
oh my God. But I think for me, I really started thinking about this a lot more with my little. So I was a volunteer for Big Brothers Big Sisters for most of the pandemic. And my little, she's going to be 12 next month. But back when she was 9, it was like 94 degrees outside. And I don't know where we were going. We were going to be outside. But she was in this slightly cropped top, and like her belly button was showing, and she was in short shorts. And I just remembered that like if I dressed like that when I was 9, I would have been called all kinds of sluts and whores.
Wouldn't
And
even
like
been let out the house because my grandma wouldn't have like.
and like we're 9 years old. And so she was 9, she was like, boys are gross. She didn't understand why girls wanted one. Like, she was not even thinking about those things. She was thinking about the fact that it's hot, she wants to dress comfortable, she wants to be cute. And I was just so sad because I was like, that would not have been allowed for me. And it was like seeing her live my dream. I'm like, damn, purity culture really fucked me up. Before I go any further, I do have a quick tangent like about purity culture. I think a lot of it breeds pedophiles. Like, it forces us to police the bodies of women and girls. And so we see children's bodies as sexual when they should be seen as neutral in our brains. We should not be looking at little girls as if they're trying to cause a sexual reaction in someone. They are not. They're just trying to live, and you're a pervert if you see them that way.
I want to add to this tangent because this happens a lot on social media, and there's a very clear double standard. When people post little girls, anything from their hair, like, oh, that's too grown. Now, mind you, do I think a 3-year-old need to be in a freaking, what are the kids calling it, a bust down 50-inch, whatever the fuck? No, it's ridiculous. Sometimes it don't even be nothing that extreme. It's just like so much policing. But you don't see that same thing with the little boys. And I want to go a step further with a lot of these women who be commenting on like little boys. You're weird. You're weird. Like, y'all need to be on a list. That's my little boyfriend. Oh, he gonna be a heartbreaker. I don't like when men or anybody says it about little girls, and I don't like it when y'all say it about little boys. It's weird that y'all are looking at or sexualizing an interaction between two kids. That's my cat's feeder. But if it's two kids of the same gender, it's an agenda. But when y'all do it, it's not. Okay. Because I can tell you one thing, I was not thinking about boys at all until like end of middle school, going into high school. And that was because, peer pressure, and that's the normal thing that you're supposed to be doing, quote unquote, supposed to be doing. So it's just like, yeah, y'all need to stop being weird with kids. You don't want to treat them right, and then you want to sexualize them. I just, wow.
I have to tell this story, but when I was 11, my mama had signed me up for this abstinence only talk, and it was only for the girls. And we had to leave class in the middle of the day and go to this auditorium where a white woman preached to us about having sex before marriage. And to illustrate her point, she picked out some volunteers from the audience, and each girl was handed a cup of water and an Oreo. And she turned them around, whispered directions in their ear, and then she had them face us. And when they did, each girl had varying amounts of chewed up and spitting Oreo floating around in their cup. And so she asked us to pick a cup that we drink from, and we all chose the cups of water that had no Oreo in it. And she said that having any amount of sex before marriage was the equivalent to giving your husband a cup of water with floating Oreo when he deserved a pure cup of water. That was my foundation for how to look at sex. And sometimes I really be like gaslighting myself, and I'm like, oh, I'm not that sexually repressed or traumatized. And then I remember this and I'm like, yes, I am, because this fucked me up in so many ways. And I think for me, it made me really afraid to figure out who I was sexually. Like, I was actively discouraged from sexual pleasure, where boys were actively encouraged. They did not have any talk like this. They were just so like, oh, having sex makes you a man. Meanwhile, it's like having sex makes you gross and disgusting and dirty Oreo water.
So we gotta accept the dirty Oreo water, but they don't. Because
Yeah.
a lot of the women with pure cups of water is accepting cups with the water ain't even in there no more. It's just a big clumps. It's just a big old nasty clump of just spit up Oreo. But we deserve that. You want to talk about traumatizing? That actually sounds horrifying. I'm so sorry. And that sounds illegal.
Traumatized.
No, it sounds illegal. They was doing too much in these schools.
No, I literally have been asking people. I was like, oh, did you have that too? And they were like, no. I was like, what?
That's insane.
My mama signed a permission slip. So
we had the abstinence only and the fear mongering around STDs that did not stop people from getting STDs. But nah, beloved, that sounds like some out of a, I don't want to say something offensive, but it sounds like some out of a particular type of church. If you know, you know. If you watched enough of these cult documentaries, you know exactly what church I'm talking about.
She could have been. I have no idea where they got this white woman or why she came to our school to tell us we were sluts and whores. But no, like, a lot of this like just really made me afraid of sex and sexuality. And it was so bad. Like, I did not know that my body could be used for pleasure until I was like 17, when a boy had to teach me what an orgasm was because no one else did. And before then, I was like, oh, my body is for bleeding and to make babies. That's it. I didn't know what an orgasm was. And so when I learned that like my body could be this source of pleasure, I started being like, oh, I'm going to burn in hell for this because my body's not supposed to do something like this.
So you never even, we're going to have to put all kind of warnings, but you never even masturbated or anything?
I did, but not to orgasm. I didn't know what that was.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure that's a very like common experience. I was a little more like curious and stuff. And initially when I started doing it, I didn't. But when it finally happened, Like, I didn't know what was happening. I just know that once you experience, it's never like the first time. Like, it was just like, I feel like I was having an outer body experience. I think I was like 12 or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Listen, telling on myself. Anyway. No, but it's natural. Like, a lot of kids, you're
Yeah.
exploring your body. I think I was curious about my body, but that particular thing I would do, but nothing was happening. And then one day something did happen, and I was like, what's happening? And then I liked it and I wanted to do it all the time. But that's a
Same.
conversation for another.
I liked it. I wanted to do it all the time, but then I was like, no, I'm gonna burn in hell for this. And so I think for me it was like masturbation became this guilty pleasure, and it took years for me to move from like that to like, no, let me go rub one out real quick.
Oh my gosh, so many church babies have masturbation like guilt trauma. And honestly, I had a couple of times where I've cried after, and I grew out of that because for me it was like, well, I'm not having sex with another person, but I know people who said who every time several people have told me, yeah, I used to cry every time because I felt so guilty, like I was gonna go to hell. And I was like, damn, y'all ain't even let the girls get off by themselves. Like, you say no sex before marriage, like we can't do nothing. Strict. Y'all is too strict. Like,
I don't think I ever cried after. I was just like, oh, one more time and then I'm not gonna do it again. And I kept trying to fast.
You know what? I think I probably attempted something like that too. Like, oh, I'm gonna stop doing that, and I did. Maybe I lasted a couple of days.
It just took me a long time to go from like this place of guilty pleasure to a place where it's like, no, you know what? I deserve to feel good today. And also, it's good stress relief, right? It's good for me in a lot of different ways. And I shouldn't feel guilty about that. And to learn the things that I like sexually, like what are the things I like? What are the things I don't like? How can I advocate for myself in a sexual space? How do I make sure that my needs and my desires are met as well? This is a big one, and this is something that I learned when I talked to men about their sexual experiences when I wrote A Night at Fontaine. Overwhelmingly, men do not have bad sex. They have varying levels of pleasure depending on whether there's protection or not. And they were talking about vaginas being more rigidy or smooth, but they're going to be pleased regardless. They don't care. And so for me, it became this thing of like, oh, I need to make sure that I'm fulfilled because they're always going to be fulfilled. They're always taken care of. You don't need the pussy cleanses. You don't need the okra water. You don't need to take the dick riding classes. You don't need any of that.
I wish men cared the way women do because they taking
Yes.
dick sucking classes.
A lot of the energy that women who are dating men put into like pleasing men, I think a lot of that could be redirected to making sure that we are pleased and to make sure that we are sexually fulfilled.
I think what you just mentioned really gets to that double standard. And I think children internalize that. And we know that based on our interactions with them in school. Like, but it's also manifest in girls being hostile to other girls, fighting each other over boys while the boys stand around and laugh at both of them because he's going to continue to keep playing that game with both of them. Even the way girls talk about other girls, even the way the boys talk about the girls, and the girls who will agree with the boys, because again, the pick me phenomenon is not a new thing. It is a symptom of wanting to feel like you're different from other girls. And so we saw how this manifested in that when girls had sex in school, they were a hoe, they were this, that, and the other. When boys, the same boys that were having sex with these quote unquote hoes, oh, they're cool. You know what I mean? So it's like even the way it starts in childhood, there's that sense of entitlement. And that's why we have all these issues around consent. Y'all socialize young cis boys specifically to feel like they are entitled to sex, but women shouldn't want it. Well, if they don't want it, how do you get it? Let's have a conversation about it, because then now it's going to get ugly and it's going to prove that y'all are literally creating rape culture, the rape culture that you act like doesn't exist. So it's really a cycle. I'm only 31 years old. I'll be 32 in a few months. I'm still not free from it. Like I still have to work through certain things regarding my relationship to sex and my sexuality. The shift has come over the years because I have been like in no kind of romantic situation for years. And during that time, even though I had crushes and stuff, I never told them because I've been extremely traumatized. I can't name a person who treated me kind. I can't name a person who didn't make me feel like physically I wasn't enough. So there's all these dynamics specifically for people red as black women, specifically if you dark skinned, specifically if you fat or disabled or whatever, that impacts our relationship to sex and sexuality because all of that is sort of wrapped up in who deserves and who doesn't. I don't know. That's getting a little complicated, but I really can't separate it because for me, it's really attached to that. Like feeling like I don't deserve pleasure. And that has impacted my ability to access the kind of pleasure that I desire.
When I was a child, I was very sex averse, and for a lot of different reasons that we've already talked about. But like, I remember my early 20s, like, I was like, oh, you know what? I do like the way my body looks. And I think for me, I wanted to enjoy sex for me. And I felt like as a teenager, it was more so this like pressure that was put on me and these connotations that came with the way that my body looked. But it's like I want to enjoy my body for me. I want to enjoy the way that I look. I want to enjoy sex for me. I don't want to be thinking about like, oh, are you sexually what about me? Like what about me? And so I think for me as an adult, especially someone who's like going through a divorce, who we'll see, may date again, there are certain things that like I want sexually that 10 years ago I was afraid of. There are things that I'm more comfortable doing sexually that 10 years ago I was afraid of. And so I'm kind of excited about that, but I'm also worried because I do date cishet men and we know how they are.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back into like the policing of our bodies and like that gaining ownership of that. Like everybody's relationship to sexuality is different. But for me, I feel like there's still a lot of shame around it when it comes to people who enjoy sex, especially women. It's seen as like superficial or like, oh, you can't have a real, meaningful, loving relationship if that's all you focus on. Can't people have both? I kept struggling between like, do I just want a sex partner or do I want a relationship? And I realized where I am in my life, I want both. And I want both to be fulfilling and pleasurable and exciting and fun. And some people would say, well, you asking for too much. Or somehow wanting like to have pleasurable sex, robust sex, and have a meaningful relationship, like somehow that can't exist or that it's wrong to like for that to be important. So yeah, I think that's attached to that shame that we internalized about that. It's attached to not feeling like our body belongs to us and we can do whatever we want with it. And that our body deserves pleasure, it deserves tenderness. So yeah, I think it's all in conversation with each other.
I agree. Are you ready to take a break?
Yep.
Let's get into ways you can support the Hoodoo Plant Mamas. One is through our bookshop where you can buy the books that we've previously discussed with our Writing the Spirit guests. We have a Hoodoo's beginner guides as well as our top reading picks. You can also buy my books. Every purchase you make helps support our show. Check us out at bookshop.org/shop/Hoodoo Plant Mamas or the link in our show notes. Other ways you can support us include rating and reviewing this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Hoodoo Plants and Instagram at Hoodoo Plant Mamas.
Also, check out our Patreon where we share exclusive video, plant, and spiritual content for only $3 a month. We also have new patrons. Hi, Lainey and Kimberly. Thank you so much for supporting us. If you prefer a one-time donation, you can donate via Cash App, $ Hoodoo Plant Mamas, or our PayPal, hoodooplantmamas@gmail.com. Let's get back to the show.
For today's episode, our hidden hoodoo is Mother Catherine Seals. I learned about her in the book Conjuring the Calabash. So, the Louisiana Weekly called Mother Catherine Seals, quote unquote, the founder of the largest cult in America. But I'm going to read some of her bio from a New Orleans NPR article. Mother Catherine Seals was born Catherine Nanny Cowens in Kentucky. In 1913, she left Kentucky for New Orleans. Within a year, she married, and her husband was physically abusive towards her, so she left him. She married two more times, each husband more abusive than the last. And her third husband beat her so bad she had a stroke and was paralyzed. So then Catherine goes to a levee on the Mississippi River to see a healer named Brother Isaiah. He's a white man who claims to be a prophet and healer, but he turns her away because she's black. And so she prays for help, and she's visited by a spirit who tells her to create her own organization of sinners so she can help and heal. And so she studies under Mother Leafy Anderson, who's a black woman and the founder of the spiritual church movement in New Orleans. She instructed Catherine on how to build her own church. At the time, many people in the lower Ninth Ward held churches in their house, and many white people associated their rituals with voodoo because of the African traditions and the fact that to white people, voodoo meant black, dangerous, and evil. And so to escape the persecution, to kind of escape those associations, Nanny Cohen's wanted her church to be on the outskirts of town. She changed her name to Mother Catherine Seals and bought an entire block in the lower Ninth Ward, built a 10-foot wall around her property, and got to work building the Temple of Innocent Blood on Charbonnet Street. Reports of the temple said that there were two main buildings, Mother Catherine Seals' private ritual space, and then her manger, which was an open air building that could hold over 300 people. Records say that there were usually over 500 lamps blazing at any given time, and there were small clay sculptures made by Mother Catherine all over the place, and the area was very muddy. Because her place was out of the way, it was hard for many people to get to her, even the clan. So people had to trek through marshlands to receive her healing powers. She was said to use simple ingredients like castor oil and Epsom salt to ward off or expunge diseases. There are descriptions of people having wounds healed through chickens that were tied to their legs and stuff like that. Like Father Divine from our last episode, Mother Catherine Seals had an integrated congregation, but her focus with the Temple of Innocent Blood was women who were abandoned and abused by men like she had been. So she harbored pregnant girls, homeless youth, and abused women and their children because she realized that women who had children out of wedlock, both black and white, were discarded by society, and the children were subjected to violence and abuse. So they were innocent blood, like Jesus, who was also born out of wedlock. A reporter recounted in 1924 that a small black girl ushered people in and told white people and men that they had to sit in the back because the front was reserved for saints only, like her and other black girls and women. Zora Neale Hurston actually visited the Temple of Innocent Blood in the 1920s, and she studied Mother Catherine's work and wrote about her in her book, The Sanctified Church. Mother Catherine Seals led the Temple of Innocent Blood from 1922 until her death in 1930. She was either 33 or 43. No one knows for sure because she was born before 1900, and people before then, a lot of people don't know their birthday. So she is regarded as a patron saint of the Ninth Ward. So before we get going, Danny, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, so I find this story absolutely fascinating for a few reasons. The first is I wrote a short story eerily similar to this. After a few rejections, I've like shelved it or whatever. I just haven't touched it. But the story was about a woman in New Orleans who took in abused women, girls, and queer folks. The main character was this queer black girl who was leaving an abusive relationship, and she ended up falling in love with one of the women that was helping her get back to Mississippi, another woman who had been taken in by this New Orleans woman. So I'm honestly just like not surprised that an actual person, like a real person like that exists. I also love that she called children out of wedlock innocent blood because this a tangent, and I'm a die on this hill. Going back to the fact that y'all don't like kids, y'all don't respect them or treat them as humans, people also somehow blame children for whatever issues they have with their parents. Or if your parent has some issue, you're like guilty by association. You're guilty for being born. It's kind of rooted in the idea that like we're bastards. Like if we're born out of wedlock, we're bastards. Like, damn. What I mean, I promise you I didn't want to come. I didn't. And so it just goes in line with the way people like being, I think her uplifting children in that way, uplifting women, but also honoring the fact that like these children are innocent. Um, it kind of pushes back against the ways people ban religion, especially to justify the abuse of women, children, and queer folks, but especially children. So again, we can go down a deep dive on that another day, but bless Mother Catherine, okay, doing the good work.
This was a woman that had been turned away in so many different ways. Like, one, each of her husbands were abusive to her. She ended up disabled from it. She tried to get help. White men also turned her away. And so, as a result of that, she's like, I'm going to build my own thing. I'm going to build my own community. And I'm going to do it centering the very people that society turns away. So, I really do appreciate her for doing that work. Something that I thought was very curious about this, like me not knowing about Father Divine, me also not knowing about Mother Catherine Seals, was like they were not the only big black, well, there were a lot of spiritualists around this time in the 1920s. And so I was very curious about why a lot of these spiritual figures were popping up. Because I know in 1917, there was a world war. In the 1918, there was the pandemic. In 1990 to the 1920s, there was Red Summer, where a lot of white people were murdering black people, which triggered the Great Migration and a lot of black people moving up north to try to escape that violence. And so there were all of these terrible, terrible things that were happening. And then at the same time, there were all these spiritual figures popping up. And so I'm thinking about today how there are so many spiritual figures. A lot of them are on social media, but I think a lot of them are like probably the modern day equivalent to a Mother Catherine Sills or to a Father Divine.
You know, I was thinking a lot about that, and I honestly have been trying to figure out who's actually comparable to them in today's world that isn't a hateful social media influencer. And one person that came to mind was TD Jakes, comes pretty close, especially in the 90s. But I'm also wondering about like more contemporary because like yeah, there's been a few black led cults that have gotten exposed in the last few years, but I'm wondering if anyone is comparable to the level of influence that Father Divine and Mother Catherine had. Is there anybody you can think of? Like, because social media is such a, while it's a big, huge, feels like limitless place, it really is small in the grand scheme of things. And these two people were larger than life, and they were also like pushing back against particular systems.
Mm.
And I don't really know who's actually doing that in the same way, like literally creating something like an underground railroad for abused people, for abused women. Like, who's doing that? Creating, buying out buildings to house black people and help them get jobs and all that kind of stuff. Like, who's really doing that?
That's a good question. I think social media is also more fragmented
Mm-hmm.
than like 100 years ago,
Yeah.
where you had to actually physically gather and be in a place.
Yeah. And again, there's these cults that are all over the country, but none of them really come close because while obviously with Father Divine, there's some questions there about ethics and what was going on and how he was getting the money. But like when it comes to these other people, even cult leaders like Jim Jones who were inspired, you were not. Like when it came down to it, you devolved and ultimately these people, perished versus Father Divine's people was still in that house with his altar in old age, like living. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go back on a tangent with my fave because I'm actually fascinated with both of them. Like, how could y'all not find each other? But then again, I don't know because Father Divine and his, like, I know he was like had his kind of progressive ideas about race and gender, but I think the patriarchy would have came out in this one if they tried to link
Yeah.
up.
I think he was mainly in the north, right? Around
Yes,
that
even
time,
though
New
he
York and Pennsylvania and stuff.
yeah, he was in Georgia for a period of time. Some people think he's originally from Rockville, Maryland, which for me, it's feeling like Maryland is southern. Like a large chunk of it is pretty southern. But yeah, he was in New York when a lot of this shit happened, like when
Mhm.
he got big. So the fact that she did this in Louisiana is actually amazing. I know we about to end the show, but I got something to say about Brother Isaiah because a white man who calls himself a healer and this, that, and that, and you still got time to be racist. So God gave you allegedly, some God, some spirit gave you a gift, but you still able to be racist. Like they told you you could still be racist. Okay.
I actually had to look him up after this because I had never heard of him either. But apparently, there were people who were like, "Oh, he healed me," but then 5, 10 years later was like, "Oh, I was caught up in the hysteria. He didn't actually heal me," and so somebody died. I think that's what happened. Somebody he had claimed to heal somebody. Somebody had died, and so then they were trying to sue him, and he got chased out of Louisiana.
I feel like that was audacious. You gonna turn somebody away, but you call yourself a healer. I'm just always amazed at how people be having time to be racist under certain circumstances. Like how you got time to be thinking about all this, and you got this allegedly this big beautiful gift to help the world, help people, and you like, not you, darky, but I can help everybody else. That no, I'm not buying it, and I'm glad he got ran out of town.
Same. Something that I thought was really interesting is that, well, they said this was pre Katrina. I don't know about since Katrina, but pre Katrina, there were altars around the Ninth Ward to Mother Catherine Seals.
I'm curious to know. I didn't get a chance to read everything, but how did she die? Because that's really young. Whether she was 33 or 43, that's really young.
That's why I noticed it. I don't think it said. I wonder if so when she got disabled from her third husband, she had a stroke. So I wonder if it could have been well, it was still like at least a decade later. But I wonder if it was complications from that or something.
It could be Fannie Lou Hamer when she got beat up in that jail. She had lasting wounds from that until death. So it could have been something related to that, or just something that got exacerbated because she already had the issues because of that abuse. So, but yeah, I was like, damn, that's so young. But she got to do a lot in her short life. So. Well, that's the end of the show. I would love if there's any other like suspected or people you've learned about that you don't really see a lot of attention on. Feel free to shoot us an email because I love to learn about these figures and I believe they deserve to get elevated so long as they weren't like evil or something. But even if they were evil, sometimes we still need the tea. Sometimes it's like, all right, let's get to it. Let's dig in. So yes, hit us up. If you like this episode, you can like, rate, and review Hoodoo Plant Mamas on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If anything from the show resonated with you, make sure to share it with us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Hoodoo Plants and Instagram at Hoodoo Plant Mamas. Thank y'all for listening and stay tuned next week for our next show, for our next episode.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.